Close your eyes. Feel the heat. You are here, in the heart of the arena. Rome's sun caresses your skin, and fine dust rises with every imaginary step. You hear a murmur. It's not the deafening roar you expect. It's the whisper of thousands of voices, the anticipation, the air vibrating with the presence of an immense crowd gathered here today. Your mind, perhaps, already paints the picture. Blood in the arena, an inevitable end, a crowd's cry demanding the coup de grace. But stop. Bring your ear closer to the crunch of the sand beneath your feet. Feel the pulse of the city around this immense stone bowl. The truth is more complex, more nuanced than the violent image etched into our memory. The gladiators, they were valuable, rigorously trained, fed, healed, a considerable investment for their *lanistas, their trainers. They weren't simply disposable. Their lives weren't a constant countdown to death in every combat. Think about it. An expert craftsman, a martial artist forged with years of discipline. Would you sacrifice him thoughtlessly in the first encounter? Of course not. Combats often ended with one's surrender, not necessarily with their death. The emperor or a magistrate decided their fate, and most of the time, a gladiator who had fought well, who had shown courage and skill, could receive a pardon, the missio. He could retire, continue fighting, or even earn his freedom. The crowd's shouts didn't always demand blood. Sometimes they applauded skill, courage, technique. It was a sport, yes, brutal, undoubtedly, but it was also an art, a performance, a dance of risk and reward. Gladiators had fans, had fortunes, had fame. They were the stars of the show. Their faces were depicted in mosaics, on oil lamps. They weren't just meat for the slaughter. They were heroes, symbols of strength and bravery. So the next time you imagine the Colosseum, don't just see the red of blood. Look at the nuances, the gleam of armor, the sweat, the strategy, the sigh of relief from a crowd when a favorite is pardoned. And as the image of the Colosseum gently fades, the Rome you thought you knew continues to reveal its veils. We now move to another space, one we also believe we understand, another place where feasts and names perhaps have told us an incomplete story.
Your mind conjures images of endless banquets, tables laden with delicacies, the gleam of amphorae, the murmur of satisfied voices bordering on excess. And then, that deeply ingrained idea of a place, a discreet space in the villa to which guests would withdraw for a moment, a peculiar ritual to be able to resume the party, to prolong the pleasure until dawn. That is the image often presented to us, an opulence so immoderate that it required an escape. But if you pause, if you close your eyes and let the sound envelop you, the echo of the great Roman structures tells you another story, not one of private decadence, but of ingenious simplicity. It is a whisper that speaks of multitudes, of thousands of bodies moving in unison. Think of the amphitheaters, the immense theaters, places where people gathered en masse, where order and flow were essential. Imagine the end of a spectacle, the excitement still vibrating in the air, and then the urgent need for everyone to exit, without chaos, without stampedes. It is there that the name, which sounds so suggestive of gluttony, finds its true root. The term vomitorium did not describe an act of purging, but a function, a gate, a mouth through which the human tide was vomited outwards, quickly and efficiently. It was not a feasting chamber. It was a passageway, a series of strategically designed ramps and tunnels, like those you can still see in the Colosseum, for example. Passages that allowed the vast space to be emptied of thousands of spectators in a matter of minutes. a miracle of Roman civil engineering, a testament to their ability to manage urban life on a grand scale. Not a decadent luxury, but a practical necessity. A functional design for the unstoppable flow of people. It is the whisper of pragmatism, the voice of a civilization that knew how to build for everyday life, for functionality, for that constant coming and going. And in understanding this truth, that image of unbridled Rome is nuanced, revealing a much more ingenious facet, one that valued efficiency, order, and the management of the immense number of people who populated their cities. A constant flow not only of people, but also of other aspects of daily life, of how those spaces the crowd abandoned were maintained, of their cleanliness.
You close your eyes and let your imagination take you. You see the grand arches, the gleaming marble. You imagine Roman baths as temples of purity, a place of clear water, purifying steam, an immaculate shine in every corner, a space where dirt dissolves and the body is renewed. But if you draw closer, if you let time blur around you, you'll feel something else. Feel the steam, dense and heavy. Smell the closeness of other bodies, of stale oils and sweat mixed with cheap perfumes. There isn't that aseptic intimacy you seek today. The baths with a pulsating heart of social life, a whirlwind of conversations, transactions, games, and laughter. But they were also a place of hygiene, very, very different from yours. That soap you know, that bubble that envelops you today, didn't exist. Instead, perfumed oils were applied and then removed with the strigil, a metal scraper. Imagine the sensation on your skin, sharing the same air, the same space, the same vapors with hundreds of people every day. You think of the latrines, those rows of marble seats with no separation whatsoever. Water constantly flowing beneath, yes, but the idea of privacy, of a personal space for your most intimate needs, was non-existent. And for final cleansing, a sponge was used, attached to a stick. A sponge that, once used, was returned to a bucket of salt water for the next person to use. Feel that reality, the skin, the fluids, the constant presence of the other. Cleanliness for them was not a matter of eliminating germs, an idea that would take centuries to emerge. It was a social ritual, a way to participate in the community, to feel part of the collective body of Rome. Purity, as they conceived it, did not reside in individual isolation, but in shared immersion. Privacy was an unknown luxury in these spaces of purification. Personal hygiene merged with communal interaction. The idea of the pristine, the untouchable, vanishes in the steam and the echoes of those conversations. The smell of the steam dissipates. The sunlight filtering through the bath windows now seems to blur, and with it the sound. The murmurs of bodies and nearby voices begin to transform, to expand. Listen carefully. The sound becomes vaster, more distant.
You close your eyes, trying to listen to ancient Rome. Most likely, your mind evokes the resonance of Latin, a powerful and resounding language, which you believed effortlessly spread to every corner of the empire. But if you listen more closely, beyond the first impression, you will feel the vast reach of Rome, its distant borders, the echoes of conquered lands. And with it, a murmur arrives, a chorus of voices. Markets are not monolingual. Feel the bustle, the merchants haggling, the travelers from distant lands. Their words intertwine.
In the ports, the sound of the sea mixes with languages you never imagined. Listen to the accents: Egyptian, Celtic, Germanic, each with its own melody, its own story. Rome, in its vastness, could not be just Latin. Latin was, yes, the language of administration, of the army, of law in the West. It was the main thread weaving the mantle of the empire. But the tapestry of sound was much, much richer. Imagine the cities of the East, like Alexandria or Antioch. There, the dominant melody was another. Greek, a language of philosophy, science, and commerce, acted as a true lingua franca. It was the language in which merchants negotiated, intellectuals debated, and even many emperors and generals communicated when visiting those regions. Think of the early Christians. Many of their sacred texts were first written and spread in Greek, even within a nominally Roman empire. Common people, retired soldiers settling in provinces, freed slaves from different parts of the world, each brought with them their own words, their own sounds. This linguistic mosaic was not a weakness, but a reflection of Rome's formidable capacity to integrate and adapt, to allow cultures to coexist under its aegis. They did not seek to erase identities, but to superimpose them. It means that when a Roman citizen, a merchant, or a soldier moved throughout the empire, they encountered a sound world much more complex than we usually believe. Communication often required polyglots, interpreters, or the use of a vehicular language like Greek. It was not an empire of a single tone, but a symphony of voices, each telling its own part of the great story. And sometimes, in this symphony, the things you believe are universal, the gestures you take for granted, are not as old or as universal as that murmur of 1,000 tongues makes you think. A persistent image dwells in your mind, a silhouette of power, an outstretched arm, a hand open towards the future, or perhaps the horizon. You see it, clear and striking, in countless works, in films that transported you to past eras. You believe you feel the weight of millennia in that simple gesture. You feel its authority, its echo in history, a mark of eternal Rome. But stop, breathe slowly, let the light shift, let the shadows lengthen. And you will see that this powerful image, this pose so deeply etched into our collective subconscious, does not project a truth as ancient as it seems. It is not a millennial whisper coming from the very heart of the Roman Forum. It is an invention, a much more recent creation, a fabricated silhouette that over time was mistakenly attributed to the majesty of Rome. Think of the grandiose canvases of the 18th and 19th centuries. Painters like Jacques-Louis David sought to evoke a heroic morality, a classical aesthetic for their own eras. And so in iconic works like The Oath of the Horatii, we see this gesture appear. A powerful visual declaration, yes, but born of artistic imagination, not from the daily tradition of the Roman citizen. There is no archaeological evidence, nor textual, to suggest that ancient Romans greeted each other or displayed their authority in such a specific and widespread manner. Records tell us of other gestures, a handshake, a verbal greeting, postures of respect, but not this one. With the passing of centuries, this theatrical and artistic invention solidified in the popular mind. It became the Roman salute, and, sadly, in the 20th century, it was co-opted, adopted by political movements seeking to legitimize themselves, wanting to anchor themselves to the grandeur of a past empire. They used that powerful shadow, that falsehood, to project their own authority and their yearning for domination, and so a visual lie, born from a paintbrush, became a disquieting part of our perception of Rome.
It deceived us. It made us believe that this gesture was as much a part of the stone and marble as the Colosseum itself. But it wasn't. It is a reminder of how history can be reshaped, how symbols can be grafted onto the past to serve modern purposes. A lesson on the importance of observing light from different angles, of questioning the first impression, of seeking the true roots of what we believe we know. And if you observe closely, you will see that not only gestures can deceive, also the great figures of that empire, the emperors and senators, are often presented to us in a singular light.
Sometimes, looking at old busts, the cold stone, you encounter an already written narrative. Kings and emperors, grandiose or monstrous, always at the extremes. Tyrants, madmen, or immaculate heroes. But if you draw closer, if you let your eyes adjust to the shadows of history, you'll see something different. A fissure in the marble. An expression that doesn't quite fit the legend. Power was a heavy burden, a real weight. And beneath that imperial purple, beneath the laurel, there were people. With their silent fears, with their moments of doubt. They weren't just archetypes. They weren't merely the villains or saviors of dramatic tales. Imagine a man like Marcus Aurelius. You know him as the philosopher-emperor, the Stoic, who wrote Meditations for his soul, a figure of unshakable wisdom. But that same man for years slept in tents on the cold battlefronts of the Danube, with the weight of an entire empire on his shoulders, dealing with plagues, invasions, and inevitable bureaucracy. His writings, those serene thoughts, were born amidst chaos, not in a tranquil retreat. There was wisdom, yes, but also mistakes, exhausting decisions, the solitude of a position where every word, every decree could mean life or death for millions. It wasn't just the gleam of gold or the roar of the plebs, it was the constant whisper of responsibility. The fixed gaze on the horizon, always searching for threats, always calculating the next move. They were men, with the complexity of any human being, with their greatness and their petty miseries, their ambitions and their sacrifices, their genius and their flaws. It's easy to judge them by the chronicles that reached us, often written by their enemies or by flatterers. It's harder to feel the cold they felt on winter nights, or the concern for the bread that would, or would not, reach the masses. History invites you to see monolithic figures, but the echo of time, if you listen closely, reveals the voices of flesh and blood people, voices that made decisions that changed the world, for better or worse, with all the humanity that implies. And those decisions, those lives lived under the crown, marked a path the empire would tread, a path that eventually would blur. The shadow of each emperor stretched and merged with the next in a long, slow sunset. The empire, after all, was also a human creation, subject to the same whims of time, to the same slow changes that transform everything we know.
You imagine the curtain falling, an abrupt end, a drumbeat sealing the fate of the great empire. You feel the cold of the encroaching night, believing you see a final act, a resonant end for eternal Rome. But if you close your eyes again, the scene changes. It transforms. It's not a curtain falling, but a vast mural washing away with the rain. It's not a collapse. It's a slow fading, a silent transformation, a patient erosion that lasted centuries, not a day. You've been told of a date, perhaps 476 AD, a deposed king, a dramatic end. But that day was just another chapter, a sigh among many, a small adjustment in a machinery that had already been reconfiguring for a long time. Think of the sun at sunset. It doesn't extinguish suddenly. It changes color. It slides gently across the horizon, and its light, once bright and direct, diffuses, dyeing the sky with new hues. So was Rome. The borders, once immutable lines defended by the legions, began to breathe, to undulate, to become porous, allowing new peoples to settle, not always as invaders, but often as federates, as neighbors, adopting aspects of Roman culture. The legions, which once seemed invincible, became increasingly local militias, more dependent on regional leaders. The roads, once vital arteries through which trade and the emperor's orders flowed, saw less centralized traffic, administration decentralized, taxes more difficult to collect. The vastness of the empire, once its strength, became a cloak too large for a single hand. While in the West, central power diluted, transforming into the first kingdoms we know today, the Eastern Empire, Byzantium, continued. Its flames burned for 1,000 more years, carrying the Roman heritage through a new era, with new languages, new religions, but with the same imperial blood. It was not an end. It was a metamorphosis, a slow reincarnation of an idea, of a civilization. Rome's legacy did not pulverize in a cataclysm. It spread, it filtered. In the laws of Europe, in the Romance languages, in the architecture of our cities, even in the very idea of a state, of an empire, of a civilization that aspires to greatness. Understanding this frees us from the simplistic vision of an end. It teaches us that great systems do not die overnight. They transform, they adapt, or they disperse into 1,000 new forms, leaving their deep mark. The light of Rome did not go out, but rather filtered into the cultures born from its ashes and its greatness. Its shadow, its transformed light is still here, breathing, reminding us that history is a river, not a pond.